The sharp crack of palm-meeting cheek sliced through the hush of the first-class cabin, louder even than the steady hum of the aircraft cruising at 35,000 feet. Everything froze in an instant. Lena Morales, clutching her 6-month-old daughter Aria, stumbled backward in shock. Her arms instinctively tightened around the wailing infant as gasps rippled through the 787's polished interior. 26 stunned passengers bore witness to a moment none would soon forget. Flight attendant Clarissa Boyd had just slapped a mother holding her baby. Clarissa's hand hovered in midair, her rage instantly replaced by disbelief. Horror widened her eyes as the weight of what she'd done crashed down upon her. 15 years in the skies for Orion Atlantic Airways, and she'd never crossed a line like this. But one impulsive moment had shattered everything she thought she knew about herself and likely ended her career. What Clarissa didn't know, what no one aboard Flight OA-118 from Brighton Bay to Eastwell City could have guessed, was that seated 14 rows back in economy, eyes locked on his laptop and lost in a sea of quarterly numbers, was Victor Hale. His name wouldn't have meant anything to Clarissa, not unless she'd seen the corporate ID buried in his briefcase or recognized him from business news headlines. Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Venture Group, the very man who'd acquired Orion Atlantic in a high-profile corporate deal just 2 years prior. More importantly, he was Lena's husband and Aria's father. At that moment, however, he was oblivious. He hadn't yet looked up to see the chaos that had erupted around his wife and daughter. 3 hours earlier, Lena had kissed him goodbye at the security checkpoint, balancing baby Aria on her hip. "I wish we could sit together," she'd said, brushing a curl away from her cheek as her free hand shifted the diaper bag on her shoulder. "They booked me in economy last minute," Victor replied, his voice warm despite the fatigue in his eyes. "First class was all that was left for you two. They promised to keep an aisle seat for you," she added, concern flickering in her gaze. Victor chuckled, his thumb grazing Aria's chubby cheek. "It's a 6-hour flight. You'll appreciate the space more than I would. Besides, I need to finish these reports before the meeting. The Bramwell acquisition is looking messier than expected." Lena had nodded, used to the weight he carried. Though they'd only been married for 3 years, she was still adjusting to the reality of being married to someone who made decisions that rippled across companies and careers. Before Aria was born, she'd been a sought-after urban design consultant. She had taken a step back for motherhood and only recently returned to light consulting projects. "Don't forget, we're meeting the Chandlers for dinner tonight," she reminded him, noting the sleepless shadows under his eyes. "I'll catch some sleep on the flight." "Promise," he said, stealing one more kiss. "Now go enjoy your royal seating while I squeeze in with the masses." Lena had laughed. "You're the only CEO I know who doesn't act like one." "Part of my charm," Victor had winked, checking his watch. "Go on, I'll find you when we land." Even after she walked toward the gate, Lena couldn't shake a flutter of nervousness. It would be her first time flying alone with Aria. Her baby girl was sweet-natured, but infants and airplanes rarely mix well. She had triple-checked her bags, extra clothes, bottles, toys, pacifiers, a compact white noise machine. But the nagging fear of forgetting something clung to her. At the gate, boarding had already begun. Lena approached the counter where a gate agent in her early 40s, name tag reading Janine, was scanning boarding passes. "Good morning," Lena greeted with a smile, shifting Aria to her other side as she offered the boarding passes. Seats 3A and 3B. Janine scanned the documents and frowned faintly. "I see you're traveling with an infant. Did you purchase a separate ticket for the child?" "No, she's a lap infant. It's noted on the reservation," Lena replied, gesturing toward the highlighted note on the boarding pass. Janine's eyebrows arched ever so slightly. "And how old is she?" 6 months. "Do you have documentation to verify that?" Lena blinked, caught off guard. She'd flown twice before with Aria, and no one had asked for proof of age. I have her birth certificate in the diaper bag. Is something wrong?" It's policy to verify the age of lap infants, Janine said, her voice polite but cool. Also, if the child becomes disruptive during the flight, you may be asked to take necessary steps to calm her. Lena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Of course. Arya is usually very calm, but I've brought everything we could possibly need. Janine offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes and handed back the documents. Enjoy your flight, Ms. Morales. It wasn't until Lena moved down the jetway that she noticed Janine had used her maiden name, despite her married name being clearly visible on her ID and the ticket. It was a small slight, but one that lingered. At the aircraft door, a younger flight attendant greeted her with a cheerful welcome and directed her to the first-class cabin. Once settled in seat 3A, Lena let out a quiet sigh of relief. The space was generous enough for her and Arya, and she quickly arranged her supplies in the seat pocket. Arya, eyes wide with curiosity, watched the parade of passengers with fascination. An older gentleman took the seat across the aisle and gave them a kind smile. "Beautiful baby," he commented. "How old?" 6 months, Lena replied, returning the smile. "I'm hoping she'll sleep through most of it." "I remember those days," he chuckled. "I'm Walter, by the way." "Lena, and this is Arya." Before the conversation could continue, a flight attendant approached, the one who would change the course of the day. Clarissa Boyd appeared composed, in her mid-40s, auburn hair tightly knotted, her uniform pristine, her smile professional. Yet, as her eyes landed on Arya, something shifted. Her smile faltered, just slightly. "Can I get you anything to drink before takeoff?" she asked Walter, voice pleasant. "Water, thank you." Clarissa turned to Lena. "And for you?" "Water as well, please." Her gaze lingered on Arya for a beat too long before she moved on. Lena felt a small knot form in her stomach. Something unspoken passed between them, a subtle undercurrent. She tried to shake it off. Maybe she was imagining it. But deep down, something told her this flight wouldn't go smoothly. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Morales," the gate agent called out with a clipped tone as Lena stepped toward the jetway. Arya nestled against her hip. It wasn't until she was halfway down the narrow corridor leading to the plane that Lena realized the agent had used her maiden name, despite her ticket clearly reading Lena Hale. She exhaled, brushing off the slight. It wasn't the time to dwell on formalities. Her focus now was navigating the tight walkway while managing her daughter and their carry-on. At the aircraft door, she was greeted by a younger flight attendant whose smile actually reached her eyes. "Welcome aboard. First class is to your right." Lena thanked her and made her way into the cabin. Relief washed over her as she reached her seat. 3A. It was spacious, a small luxury she hadn't expected to appreciate quite so much until now. She nestled Arya onto her lap and began unpacking the essentials. Formula, wipes, a small plush lamb, and a pacifier, all tucked neatly into the seat pocket within arm's reach. Across the aisle, an older gentleman with soft eyes and a kind face settled into his seat. He offered Lena a gentle nod and smiled down at Arya, who stared back with wide-eyed wonder. "Such a sweet little one," he said warmly. "How old?" 6 months, Lena replied, managing a tired but grateful smile. "I'm hoping she'll nap most of the flight." "I remember those days," the man chuckled with a wistful tone. "Mine are all grown now. I'm Walter, by the way. Lena, and this is Arya." Before they could continue, a woman approached with an air of practiced grace and a clipboard tucked against her side. Her uniform was crisp, her auburn hair pulled tightly into a no-nonsense bun. Her face bore the look of someone who had spent decades managing small emergencies at 30,000 feet. She moved with the confidence of experience and just a hint of underlying edge. It was Clarissa Boyd, though Lena wouldn't know her name until much later. "Can I offer you something to drink before takeoff?" she asked Walter, her customer service tone perfectly rehearsed. "Just water, thank you." Clarissa turned to Lena. Her smile, however, seemed to hesitate the moment she saw Arya in Lena's arms. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to spark something small and uneasy inside Lena. "Water for you as well?" Clarissa asked, voice noticeably cooler. "Yes, thank you," Lena replied. Clarissa's eyes lingered on Arya for just a beat too long. Then she moved to the next passenger without another word. Lena's stomach tightened. It was subtle, too subtle to name, but it was there. Something in Clarissa's demeanor shifted the moment she saw them. Lena shook the thought away. Maybe she was reading into it too much. Maybe she was tired. Maybe it was nothing. Still, the knot in her gut didn't quite go away. Meanwhile, back in economy, Victor Hale had settled into his seat on the aisle, his laptop already open. His mind was a flurry of spreadsheets and acquisition updates, the Bramwell deal demanding every ounce of his attention. The woman in the center seat beside him was immersed in a paperback novel, while the man at the window had already drifted into sleep. Victor checked the time, gauging how much progress he could make before landing in Eastwell City. He closed his eyes briefly as the safety demonstration began, pausing his work out of respect. It was a habit he'd picked up in the early days after acquiring Orion Atlantic. He'd insisted on sitting down with cabin crews, listening to feedback, and walking in their shoes, even flying some domestic routes as a silent observer. Those conversations had changed the way the company operated. That respect, deeply earned, had built a rare trust between Victor and the people who worked under his leadership. Trust that would now be tested in ways no one could have foreseen. The aircraft rumbled, then began its pushback from the gate. Soon, the engines roared to life, and the plane climbed steadily into the sky above Brighton Bay. As the seatbelt sign chimed off, Victor dove back into his work. 14 rows ahead, Lena was giving Arya a bottle, hoping the gentle sucking would help with the pressure in her ears. To her relief, it seemed to work. Arya was calm, nestled into the crook of her mother's arm. But the peace didn't last. About 40 minutes into the flight, Arya began to squirm. She had finished the bottle, but was growing restless. Her cheeks flushed, and soft whimpers turned into short cries. Lena adjusted her position, gently bouncing her daughter and humming softly. She tried one pacifier, then another. A small toy. Nothing quite settled her. "Everything okay over there?" Walter asked gently from across the aisle, his brow furrowed with concern rather than irritation. "She's just overtired, I think," Lena said softly. "Didn't nap well this morning. Too much rushing around." Walter offered a kind smile. "My daughter used to walk up and down the aisles when her little ones got fussy. The motion helped soothe them. Maybe give that a try when it's safe." "That's a great idea," Lena replied, grateful for the suggestion. "I'll wait until they're done with drink service." As if summoned, Clarissa was making her way down the aisle with the beverage cart. Her movements were fluid, her routine clearly second nature. But as she approached Lena's row, Arya's fussiness grew. Intermittent cries breaking through the cabin's soft hum. Clarissa didn't try to hide her displeasure this time. "Water, right?" she asked Lena, her tone now noticeably colder than when she'd spoken to Walter. "Yes, thank you," Lena replied, trying to balance her daughter while accepting the cup. Arya let out a louder cry just as Clarissa placed the cup down. The flight attendant's jaw tightened, and Lena saw the flicker of judgment in her eyes. And with that moment, the tension between them began to crystallize. Lena struggled to juggle the small paper cup of water and a squirming, increasingly fussy Arya. As she settled the drink onto the tray, Clarissa Boyd leaned forward to place it more securely, just as Arya released a sharp, frustrated wail. Clarissa's expression shifted instantly. Her lips pinched into a tight line. "Ma'am, you need to keep your child quiet. We have other passengers trying to enjoy their flight." The remark landed like a slap. Its tone wasn't merely firm, it carried unmistakable irritation. Lena blinked, startled, but steadied her voice. "I'm doing my best," she replied gently, cheeks burning. She's usually calm, just a bit overtired today. Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you should have considered that before booking a first-class ticket. Some passengers pay a premium expecting peace and quiet." Lena froze for a breath. The implication was loud and clear. Not only did Clarissa question her ability to manage her child, she seemed to question whether Lena even belonged in this cabin at all. Dressed in comfortable travel clothes, her dark curls loosely tied back, Lena didn't exactly blend in with the other sleek-suited travelers. And her features, warm, brown-skinned, Latina, likely stood out to someone like Clarissa. "I did pay for my seat," Lena said, a little sharper than intended, immediately wishing she hadn't responded. Clarissa only huffed and moved down the aisle. "Just keep it under control." Walter leaned forward from across the aisle, his expression full of quiet sympathy. "Don't mind her," he said gently. "Some people forget what it's like to travel with little ones." Lena managed a grateful smile, but the tension remained. Clarissa's words clung to her like static. Arya was still fussing, restless, but not yet fully crying. Lena stroked her back softly. "It's okay, mi amor," she whispered in Spanish. "Mama's here." Once Clarissa's cart had passed and the aisle was clear again, Lena stood up with Arya and slowly began pacing the first-class cabin, remembering Walter's advice. The soft motion seemed to help. Arya's cries softened, her tiny fists unclenching. Lena kept her steps steady, humming a gentle lullaby. Her daughter's eyes, heavy with sleep, started to flutter closed. Lena exhaled, tension slowly leaving her shoulders. But just as Arya surrendered to rest, the plane gave a sudden, sharp jolt. A patch of turbulence rattled the cabin. Startled, Arya let out a shriek, her body jerking in Lena's arms. The loud ping of the seatbelt sign followed seconds later. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the seatbelt sign," came the voice over the intercom. "Please return to your seats and fasten your belts." Lena hurried back to her seat, bouncing Arya gently in her arms, trying to soothe her back to sleep. But the baby's cries only intensified. Lena wrestled with the seatbelt, trying to click it in one-handed while still holding her daughter securely. Suddenly, Clarissa was there again, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Ma'am," she said sternly, "you need to take your seat immediately and quiet your child." "I'm trying," Lena said breathlessly, finally managing to lock the belt in place. She was almost asleep before the turbulence. "Well, she's not asleep now," Clarissa muttered. Her voice was low enough to avoid drawing attention, but her disdain was palpable. "She's disturbing the entire cabin." "Do you have something to pacify her?" she added, the question laced with condescension, as if Lena hadn't thought to bring the basics for her child. "Yes, of course," Lena replied, reaching beneath the seat for her diaper bag. She pulled out a pacifier and offered it to Arya, who immediately shoved it away and wailed louder. Clarissa sighed, clearly annoyed. "Perhaps you should reconsider traveling with an infant if you can't keep her calm. Some passengers are trying to work or sleep." The words stung. Lena had spent days preparing for this flight. She had packed everything, planned every detail. She took a slow breath, willing herself to stay composed. "I understand your concern for the other passengers," she said evenly. "Arya is usually great on flights. She's just having a rough moment." The baby's cries continued, cutting through the hum of the cabin. Lena could feel eyes on her. Most passengers looked away, trying to offer privacy. But a few cast glances of mild irritation. She tried a second pacifier, then a soft rattle, gently bouncing Arya all the while. Back in economy, Victor remained blissfully unaware. His noise-canceling headphones muted everything but the numbers in front of him. The seatbelt sign had caught his attention briefly, just long enough to click his belt, but then he returned to the complexity of corporate restructuring. Meanwhile, Lena was waging a quiet war with exhaustion, guilt, and frustration. 20 long minutes passed in a haze of soothing whispers, baby cries, and judgmental stares. Aria would quiet for a moment, then ramp back up, impossible to fully calm. And Clarissa, always just a few rows away, made no secret of her disapproval. Lena swayed gently from side to side, humming softly while cradling Aria. She had tried everything, pacifiers, songs, her softest lullaby, but the baby remained restless, letting out tiny sharp cries between hiccupy breaths. Every few minutes, Clarissa Boyd walked past, her gaze slicing through the air with increasing disdain. Lena could feel her disapproval even without words. Then came a new problem. Lena caught a whiff of something unmistakable. Aria needed a diaper change. Badly? She glanced at the still-lit seatbelt sign. The turbulence had lessened, but the sign hadn't been turned off. Technically, she wasn't supposed to get up, but the discomfort would only worsen Aria's crying, and that would only escalate the already tense situation. She hesitated for a second, then unfastened her belt. Cradling Aria and grabbing the diaper bag, Lena rose from her seat. She hadn't taken 2 steps into the aisle before Clarissa materialized, her posture rigid. "Ma'am," she said sharply, "the seatbelt sign is on. You need to return to your seat immediately." "I understand," Lena replied calmly, "but my daughter needs a diaper change. I'll be quick." Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "The lavatory is off limits while the sign is on. FAA policy. It's for your safety." Lena nodded, keeping her voice steady. "I get that, but in situations like this, don't flight crews usually allow—" "No exceptions," Clarissa cut her off. "Return to your seat. Now." The finality in her voice was not just about policy. It was personal. Lena, flushed with frustration, turned to comply. But as she pivoted back toward her seat, Aria's tiny hand flailed out unexpectedly and knocked into the tray table, sending the untouched cup of water tumbling. The cold liquid splashed straight across Clarissa's uniform skirt. She gasped audibly, jerking backward as the water soaked the fabric. Several passengers turned toward the commotion. "Look what you've done," she snapped, her voice now loud enough to draw attention from the rest of the cabin. "I'm so sorry," Lena said quickly. "It was an accident." Clarissa grabbed a napkin from the cart, blotting at the wet patch with exaggerated frustration. Her face was flushed, lips pursed. "Control your child," she snapped. "This behavior is completely unacceptable." Lena stiffened, her patience now hanging by a thread. "She's a baby, not a machine. I said I was sorry, and I meant it." "Well, clearly it's not enough," Clarissa shot back. "Some people shouldn't fly if they can't handle the responsibility." The words hit Lena like a punch. She stood frozen for a beat, her pulse ringing in her ears. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "What exactly are you implying?" Clarissa's jaw tensed. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating that you're being inconsiderate by not controlling your child." The cabin had gone quiet. The tension between the two women now hung thick in the air. "And I suppose you think I get away with it because of my—" "What?" Lena asked, her tone suddenly ice, the implication slicing through her like glass. Clarissa flinched, realizing she'd ventured too far. "Because of your attitude," she said finally, though it was clear she had originally meant something else entirely. Lena didn't reply, but her eyes locked on Clarissa, refusing to look away. From across the aisle, Walter began to rise from his seat, his concern obvious. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, his voice steady as he looked between the two women. Clarissa answered quickly. "Everything's fine. I'm just reminding this passenger about our safety protocols." Lena took a breath, willing herself to stay calm for Aria's sake. "I truly am sorry about your uniform," she said, her voice softer. It was an accident. Something in her tone, or maybe the fatigue written across her face, seemed to reach Clarissa. Her expression, while still tight, softened just slightly. "Just return to your seat," she muttered, her voice quieter than before. "I'll bring you napkins to help clean up." Lena nodded, relieved to feel the confrontation ebbing. She turned toward her seat, gently adjusting Arya against her shoulder. But then another unexpected movement, a shift in weight. Her purse, loosely slung over her arm, slipped. As she reached to catch it, Arya lunged, tiny fingers grabbing at a shiny button on Clarissa's jacket. What happened next would be debated for days. Some passengers would later describe Clarissa's reaction as instinctual, a startled reflex. Others would say it was a deliberate lash of pent-up anger. Regardless of the motive, Clarissa's hand shot out, connecting with Lena's cheek in a sharp, jarring slap. The sound of skin hitting skin cracked through the cabin, louder than the engine's steady roar. Time seemed to fracture. Lena stumbled back, clutching Arya close. The baby burst into a terrified wail. Gasps rippled through the first-class cabin as passengers stared in stunned silence. Clarissa's arm remained in midair for a heartbeat too long, her face frozen in disbelief. Her own shock seemed to hit her a moment too late. Around her, the air shifted. The atmosphere turned electric, charged with something irreversible. Lena clutched Arya tightly, shielding her daughter with instinctual urgency as the cabin remained gripped by the slap that had just shattered the calm. The baby's cry rose sharply, a piercing sound of fear and confusion that reverberated through the stunned silence. 26 passengers sat frozen, still processing what they had just witnessed. A uniformed flight attendant had struck a mother, while she held her child. Clarissa Boyd's hand hung awkwardly in the air, her body frozen as if time itself had slowed. The rage that had animated her seconds ago now drained from her face, replaced by an unmistakable look of horror. Her eyes darted to Lena, to the red blooming across the young mother's cheek, and finally to the passengers around them, all of whom were watching, some in disbelief, others in outrage. In over a decade of service with Orion Atlantic Airways, Clarissa had encountered every kind of difficult traveler. But never, not once, had she allowed herself to cross this line. She had no excuse, and in a single moment of unforgivable impulse, she had likely ended her career. The silence held for only a few seconds before the cabin erupted. Gasps, murmurs, sharp voices calling for a supervisor. Arya's continued wailing. Shock had given way to chaos. Lena didn't speak. Her hand rose to her cheek, now stinging, now flushed with humiliation. Her mind reeled. Everything felt surreal. Walter, moving with surprising speed for his age, crossed the aisle. His expression, usually kind and calm, was stormy. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but trembling with anger. His eyes flicked toward Clarissa, now standing motionless. Before Lena could answer, another flight attendant rushed over, a younger woman, wide-eyed and pale. Her name tag read Jenna. "I heard something. What happened?" she asked, scanning the passengers. "She hit her," a woman from behind Lena said firmly, her voice slicing through the noise. "She slapped her while she was holding her baby." Jenna turned to Clarissa, her expression one of disbelief. "Clarissa, is that true?" Clarissa opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked completely undone, her composure shattered. It wasn't," she stammered. "I saw the whole thing," another passenger interjected. "It was unprovoked. She's been hostile to her the entire flight. She's been harassing her about the baby since we took off," Walter added. Then there was a spilled drink, and everything escalated from there. Jenna looked horrified. Turning to Lena, she said, "Ma'am, please come with me. We need to get you settled. Are you hurt?" Lena could only nod, allowing herself to be guided back to her seat. Arya's cries were subsiding into whimpers now, the baby still shaken but calming slightly in her mother's embrace. Jenna crouched beside the seat. "Do you need anything? Ice for your cheek?" I'm fine," Lena said softly. "Just shaken." Her eyes dropped to Arya, who blinked up at her, wide-eyed and drowsy. "My husband is on board," Lena added. He's in economy. Can someone tell him what happened?" "Of course," Jenna said. "What's his name and seat number?" "Victor Hale," Lena answered. "He's in an aisle seat toward the back, but I don't know the number." Jenna froze for a moment. Her expression changed, recognition flashing through her face. "Victor Hale, as in the Victor Hale?" she asked carefully. Lena nodded, too exhausted to explain or pretend anymore. "Yes, that Victor Hale." The shift in Jenna's demeanor was immediate. Her posture straightened, her tone sharpened with urgency. "I'll find him myself," she said. As Jenna moved quickly toward the curtain dividing the cabins, Lena sat in silence. She could still feel the stares, some wide-eyed, others discreetly glancing, all buzzing with second-hand tension. But she didn't meet their eyes. Across the aisle, Walter had returned to his seat, but kept a quiet watch on her. "Would you like anything?" he asked softly. "A blanket? Some water for the little one?" His gentleness nearly undid her. The tears that had threatened to fall since the slap began to burn in her throat. "Water would be nice," Lena whispered, barely managing the words. Walter flagged another flight attendant, a young woman now helping to calm the cabin. She returned a moment later with a small cup of water and a cold compress wrapped in a napkin. In the back of the plane, Victor Hale was still immersed in a spreadsheet, oblivious to the scene unfolding 14 rows ahead. The tap on his shoulder startled him. He turned to see Jenna standing beside him. "Mr. Hale?" she asked quietly. He pulled off his noise-canceling headphones. "Yes?" "I need you to come with me, sir. There's been an incident involving your wife and daughter." Victor's heart slammed in his chest. "Are they okay? What happened?" "They're physically fine," Jenna assured him, keeping her voice low. "But there was an altercation with a crew member. I think it's best if you come to first class immediately." Victor closed his laptop in one swift motion, unclipping his belt and rising to his full 6'2" frame. His presence commanded attention in the narrow aisle as curious passengers craned their necks. "Lead the way," he said, his voice calm, but underneath it a storm was rising. "This way," Jenna said, her voice composed but laced with something Victor immediately recognized: controlled urgency. Beneath the professionalism, she was rattled, and now so was he. As they made their way down the narrow aisle, Jenna leaned in to quietly brief him. There was a misunderstanding that escalated. "Your wife's cheek is red, but she assured me she's okay. Your daughter was frightened, but she's starting to calm down." Victor didn't break stride. "A misunderstanding," he repeated, his tone flat, his voice making it clear he wasn't accepting any conclusion until he had the full picture. Jenna nodded slightly, continuing, "The captain has been informed. We're treating this very seriously." They reached the curtain separating economy from first class. When Jenna pulled it aside, Victor stepped through and stopped cold. There, just a few rows ahead, was Lena. She was seated, cradling Aria tightly to her chest. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Her cheek, even from a distance, showed the red outline of a slap. Victor's entire demeanor shifted. Something in him went very still. Those who knew him best understood that this quiet was dangerous. He moved to her side in a few swift strides and crouched beside her seat. "Lena," he said softly, his voice low with concern, using her name the way he did, only when it was just the two of them. Her composure, strained to the breaking point, cracked the moment she saw him. "Victor," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The flight attendant? She slapped me, in front of everyone, while I was holding Aria." Victor didn't react at first. No shout, no dramatic gesture. But the tension in his shoulders, the cold steel in his eyes, it said everything. His voice was calm, but Jenna, standing just a step behind him, took an unconscious step back. "She did what?" Lena explained it all, her voice uneven but steady. Aria's cries, Clarissa's hostility, the water, the turbulence, and then the moment that changed everything. Victor listened without interruption. His face remained composed, but a muscle along his jaw pulsed steadily. When she finished, he stood slowly. "Where is she now?" he asked Jenna. "She's with the captain," Jenna said carefully. "The air marshals have been notified. Law enforcement will meet us upon landing." Victor gave a single nod. "I want to speak with the captain. Sir, I don't know if—" "That wasn't a request," Victor said, his tone sharper now, brooking no room for debate. "Please inform the captain that Victor Hale, CEO of Hale Venture Group, would like a word." Jenna visibly swallowed. "Yes, sir. I'll let him know right away." As she turned to go, Victor sat beside Lena in the seat Jenna had cleared for him. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his hand warm and steady. "How are you, really?" he asked softly. Lena exhaled. "I'm in shock, mostly. One minute I'm trying to calm Arya. The next, I've never been treated like that before. Did she say anything that might explain why she targeted you specifically?" Lena hesitated. "Not directly, but the way she looked at me when I boarded, the way she questioned if I belonged in first class. It felt personal, like she made assumptions." Victor's eyes darkened. "Racial bias?" "Maybe," Lena admitted. "Or maybe she just didn't think a tired mom with a crying baby fit the mold of someone who should be sitting up here. Either way, it doesn't excuse what she did." "No," Victor agreed, his voice turning cold again. "It doesn't, and she's going to be held accountable." Just then, Arya let out a small fuss. Lena adjusted her grip, and Victor noticed the bulge in the diaper bag. Was she due for a change? Lena nodded. "That's why I got up before, even though the seatbelt sign was on. She was so uncomfortable." Without hesitation, Victor reached for the diaper bag. "Let me," he said. "You take a minute. Just breathe." "The seatbelt—" "I think we're past worrying about that," Victor said, managing a faint, dry smile. He gently lifted Arya from Lena's arms. "Come on, sweetheart. Daddy's got you." As he stood, a different flight attendant stepped forward, nervous but trying to be helpful. "Sir, the lavatory's just up ahead if you need it." "Thank you," Victor replied, his tone warm and composed now, entirely different from how he had addressed Jenna moments ago. As Victor walked away with Arya, Lena leaned back into her seat, letting the cushion catch her weight. The swirl of the last hour was beginning to sink into her body. Every moment, every glance, every word. She was snapped from her daze by a familiar voice. "Your husband seems like a good man," Walter said softly from across the aisle. Lena looked up and offered a tired but genuine smile. "The best? He's going to be furious, though." "He should be," Walter replied firmly. "What happened to you was inexcusable." Lena nodded slowly. "I just want to get through this flight and move on." Walter gave her a long, thoughtful look. "With all due respect, I don't think that's going to be possible." Lena looked at him, puzzled. "Why?" "Because of who your husband is," Walter said gently. "Because of who you are. This won't just disappear." "I recognized his name the moment the flight attendant said it," Walter explained, his voice low and thoughtful. "I worked in the airline industry, 30 years at Transcoastal Aviation before I retired. The acquisition of Orion Atlantic made headlines in every industry publication." Lena nodded, now understanding the subtle shift she'd noticed in Walter's demeanor since Victor arrived. "We try to keep a low profile when we travel," she said with a faint smile. "Victor doesn't like to throw his title around." "Still," Walter said, "a position of influence comes with responsibility, not just to yourself, but to prevent things like this from happening again, to others who don't have that kind of influence." Lena was about to respond when Jenna returned, stepping briskly into first class. Her expression was more composed, but still touched with unease. "Mrs. Hale," she said with careful professionalism, "the captain extends his deepest apologies for what's happened. He's asked to meet with you and Mr. Hale after we land." In the meantime, he wants you to know that Ms. Boyd has been relieved of duty for the remainder of the flight." "Thank you," Lena said quietly, noting the contrast in tone between Jenna's formality and Clarissa's earlier contempt. Just then, Victor reappeared with a freshly changed Aria in his arms. The baby, now calm and clean, blinked sleepily at her mother. He passed her gently back to Lena before turning to Jenna. "Has the captain responded to my request to speak with him? He's currently in communication with air traffic control and company leadership regarding the incident, sir," Jenna said. "He'll speak with you after landing. In the meantime, he also sends his personal apologies." Victor nodded once, accepting the delay for now. "Please inform him I expect a full explanation how something like this could happen on one of our flights." "Yes, sir," Jenna replied. Her nervousness betrayed that she and others listening had caught the quiet emphasis. Our flights. She stepped away, leaving Victor and Lena in relative quiet. He sat beside her again, took her hand, and gently squeezed it. "How's your cheek?" he asked softly. "The cold compress helped," she said. "It doesn't hurt much now." Victor looked at her, his expression still tense. This wasn't just about physical harm, Lena. What she did, it was assault. And if bias played a role, which it sounds like it did, then it's even more serious. Lena sighed, her fingers tightening around his. "I just wanted a normal flight with our daughter." "I know," he said, his voice low. "And you deserve that. The fact that it turned into this says more about this company's culture than it does about you." "It's your company now," she reminded him gently, with a hint of a smile. "Exactly," Victor replied, his jaw tightening, "which means I have the power and responsibility to make sure this never happens again." For the rest of the flight, they stayed side by side, taking turns holding Aria, who eventually gave in to sleep. The cabin crew checked in often, now noticeably more attentive, while passengers stole glances, some curious, others empathetic. Word had spread through the aircraft. Lena could tell, and by the time the plane began its descent into Eastwell City, she knew most people on board were aware that the woman who had been slapped was married to the man who owned the airline. As the plane tilted downward toward the runway, Lena felt her anxiety rising again. What waited beyond landing? Police interviews, press inquiries, and corporate fallout were all looming. Victor noticed the tension in her shoulders. He leaned in. "We'll get through this," he said softly. "And we'll make something good come out of it, I promise." Lena met his eyes and drew strength from his certainty. He had always had this ability to see through a crisis into the possibility beyond it. It was what made him a remarkable leader. It was one of the things that had made her fall in love with him. "I know," she said. "I just hope the day gets better from here." Victor smiled, just a touch of that steely charm showing through. "Oh, it will. I'll make sure of it." The wheels touched down with a soft thud, and the aircraft began to roll across the tarmac. In that moment, unknown to Clarissa Boyd, still sequestered in the crew quarters, to the passengers shifting in their seats, the next chapter had already begun. A chapter that would change not just lives, but culture. As the plane came to a stop, the door opened, and the events of the day moved quickly into official territory. A uniformed airport police officer stepped aboard before anyone could disembark, followed closely by two corporate representatives in tailored suits. Their posture was crisp, their expressions unmistakably uneasy. The officer moved straight toward Victor and Lena. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked, voice formal but respectful. Lena nodded, adjusting a sleeping Aria in her arms. "Yes, I'm Officer Rivera. I understand there was an incident during the flight. Would you be willing to give a statement?" "Of course," Lena replied, her voice steady but tired. "I'd like to settle my daughter first, if that's possible." "Absolutely," Rivera said. "We've arranged a private area for you. Take your time." As he spoke, the suited airline staff hovered nearby, looking both concerned and careful not to interrupt. Victor stood, offering his hand. I'm Victor Hale. I wasn't present when it happened, but I joined my wife shortly afterward. Rivera's expression changed slightly at the name, but his professionalism didn't waver. Yes, Mr. Hale, we've been informed. Orion Atlantic has arranged for you and your family to be escorted to their executive lounge while we complete our interviews. Of course, Lena replied gently to Officer Rivera, though I'd really like to settle my daughter first, if that's okay. Officer Rivera gave a sympathetic nod. We've arranged a private space nearby where you can feed or change her. We've been briefed on the general situation, but we'll need official statements from you and any witnesses. Victor stood beside her and extended his hand. Victor Hale, he introduced himself. I wasn't present during the incident itself, but I came up to first class as soon as I was made aware. Rivera's expression flickered for just a moment, a glimmer of recognition passing through his eyes. Still, his tone remained steady. Yes, sir, we were informed you were on board as well. Orion Atlantic has arranged for your family to be taken to the executive lounge while we continue the investigation. At that moment, one of the corporate representatives stepped forward, poised and polished in a tailored blazer. Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale, she said smoothly. I'm Evelyn Winters, Vice President of Customer Experience at Orion Atlantic. On behalf of the entire company, I want to offer our sincere apologies for what occurred today. Victor gave her a measured look. Ms. Winters, thank you for meeting the flight. As Officer Rivera mentioned, our priority right now is ensuring my wife and daughter are cared for. We'll discuss the rest soon. Of course, Evelyn replied, quickly adapting her tone. We've arranged for full privacy in one of our executive suites. You'll have everything you need, and anything else can be provided. As they spoke, passengers from first class were slowly beginning to disembark. Several glanced over at Lena, their expressions a mixture of empathy and quiet curiosity. Walter, passing slowly, paused for a moment. I left my contact info with the flight crew, he said quietly to Lena. If you need a statement or anything else, just say the word. Lena gave him a grateful smile. Thank you, Walter, truly, for everything. Once the cabin was clear, Officer Rivera motioned toward the exit. If you're ready, we'll escort you now, Ms. Boyd has already been removed and is waiting in a secure area for questioning, Evelyn added. At the mention of Clarissa Boyd, a wave of memory and emotion washed over Lena, the sharp sting of the slap, the stunned silence of the cabin, the humiliation of being assaulted in front of strangers. She swallowed hard. Victor noticed and placed a steadying hand on her back. One step at a time, he murmured. Together, they made their way through the jet bridge, where a small airport cart awaited them. Lena was quietly thankful, not just for the privacy, but for the relief of not having to carry Arya through the bustling terminal. The executive lounge was tucked into a quiet wing of the airport. Its entrance was discreet, its interior elegant and serene. A concierge opened the door as they approached, greeting them with a nod and ushering them through. They were led to a private suite at the back of the lounge, warmly lit with comfortable seating, a small dining area, and a separate room that featured a crib and changing station. We figured you might need a place for your daughter to rest, Evelyn said softly, motioning toward the adjoining room. There's also a private restroom with full facilities. Can I get you anything? Water? Tea? Lena hadn't realized until that moment how dry her throat was, how taut her nerves still felt. Water would be great, she said, then added, maybe some tea, too. Thank you. Evelyn nodded to an attendant nearby who moved quickly to fulfill the request. Officer Rivera cleared his throat gently, taking out a small notepad. I understand you've just arrived, Mrs. Hale, and I appreciate you speaking with me so soon. When you're ready, I'd like to begin taking your statement. I can take Arya, Victor offered, already extending his arms. Lena handed their now sleepy daughter over without hesitation. Thank you. Victor disappeared into the adjoining room with Arya, while Lena sank into one of the plush couches. Her shoulders slumped for the first time in hours as the adrenaline finally began to leave her body. Rivera took the seat across from her, notebook in hand. His voice remained calm, respectful. "Whenever you're ready, please walk me through what happened, from the beginning." Lena took a deep breath, then began. She described the subtle shift in Clarissa's attitude the moment she boarded with Arya. The discomfort, the tension, the unspoken but unmistakable judgment. She detailed the way Clarissa's comments escalated from passive-aggressive to openly hostile. The confrontation over the diaper change, the water spill, and then the slap. She tried to keep her voice level, but when she described the moment of impact, her voice trembled. She could still hear the sound, still feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. When she finished, Rivera paused thoughtfully. "Do you believe there was an element of racial bias in how the flight attendant treated you?" Lena hesitated. "I can't claim to know what was in her heart," she said. "But yes, I believe her behavior was influenced by assumptions about who I am, about how I look, about whether I belonged in first class. It wasn't just about a crying baby. There was something deeper in the way she spoke to me." Rivera nodded and made a note. "We're speaking with other passengers and crew as well, but your statement is incredibly important. Thank you for being so detailed." Lena nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to someone else." "There were implications," Lena said quietly. In her tone, the way she looked at me, like she was questioning whether I belonged in first class. She made comments about certain people getting away with things. It didn't feel random, it felt personal. Officer Rivera nodded as he scribbled notes into his logbook. Were there any witnesses to those earlier interactions, before the physical altercation? "Yes," Lena replied. "The gentleman seated across the aisle, Walter. He saw most of it. And I'm fairly sure the passengers behind me could hear everything as well. We'll be speaking with all of them," Rivera assured her. He looked up from his notes, then asked, "Do you wish to press charges for assault?" The question caught Lena off guard. Her breath hitched slightly, though she knew it was inevitable. After all, Clarissa Boyd had struck her, on an airplane no less, in front of witnesses. I need to speak with my husband first," Lena said honestly. "This isn't just about me. Legal action could have significant consequences for the airline, especially given Victor's position." Rivera gave a slow, understanding nod. "Of course. Take your time. Just so you're aware, regardless of whether you press charges, the airline may still take disciplinary action. And I'll be filing a report with airport authorities." "Thank you," Lena said, her voice soft. "I appreciate your transparency." Rivera stood, gently closing his notebook. "I'll give you some privacy for now. Please stay in the lounge until we've completed our investigation. If you make a decision or recall anything else, let the lounge staff know. They'll contact me immediately." With that, he excused himself. A few seconds later, Evelyn Winters re-entered the room. She had been waiting respectfully near the door. "Mrs. Hale," she began quietly, "I can't tell you how deeply sorry we are. What happened is completely contrary to our standards, our culture, and our training." Lena nodded politely, too emotionally drained to say much. Evelyn hesitated, then added, "I know it may not be the right time, but when you and Mr. Hale are ready, our CEO would like to speak with you both in person." Lena gave a faint, tired smile. "He reports to my husband, Ms. Winters. I imagine that conversation will happen either way." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, of course. I meant Marcus Bell, the CEO of Orion Atlantic itself. Your husband oversees the parent company, but Mr. Bell is in charge of our day-to-day operations." "I understand," Lena said. "I'm sure Victor will want to speak with him. Just not today. It's been a long flight." "Of course," Evelyn replied quickly. "Anything you need while you're here, I'll be available personally." Once she had left, Lena allowed herself a moment to breathe. She sank back into the couch, closed her eyes, and let the exhaustion wash over her. The adrenaline had long since faded, and now only the weight remained, the weight of humiliation, shock, and anger. The door to the adjoining room opened quietly, and Victor returned. His expression was gentler now. He'd managed to get Arya down in the crib, and she was finally sleeping peacefully. "She's out cold," he said as he took a seat beside Lena. "I know how she feels," Lena replied, her voice tinged with fatigue. She smiled faintly, then looked up at him. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges. Victor raised an eyebrow. "What did you say?" "That I needed to talk to you first," she replied. "This isn't just about one person slapping another. Whatever we decide, it'll affect the company, the staff, the precedent we set." Victor nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "You're absolutely right. But let me ask you this. If you strip away the public side of it, the corporate side, what do you want? What would justice look like for you?" Lena fell quiet for a moment. She stared ahead, not really seeing the room, just feeling the questions settle in her chest. "I don't want to ruin her life," she said finally. "What Clarissa did was wrong, completely wrong, but I don't take any satisfaction in imagining her behind bars. I want her held accountable. I want to understand why it happened. Was it personal bias? Something systemic in the airline's training? Or just one awful, inexcusable moment?" Victor looked at her, admiration softening the edges of his expression. "This," he said quietly, "is why I married you. Even after what you've just been through, you're still thinking beyond yourself, still searching for the bigger picture." "So does that mean you agree?" Lena asked. "That we shouldn't press charges?" "I think," Victor replied carefully, "we have an opportunity here, one that goes beyond legal action. You're right. Understanding what led to this is more important, and we might be able to achieve that without involving the criminal justice system, if that's the path you choose." Lena nodded slowly. "Then I need to think about what that path could look like." "I'm thinking," Victor said, his voice calm but purposeful, "that tomorrow I'll be having a very direct conversation with Marcus Bell about the culture at Orion Atlantic." He leaned back slightly, arms folded, that familiar spark of resolve lighting his expression. "And I'm thinking," he continued, "that Clarissa Boyd's future with the company might hinge less on legal consequences and more on her willingness to help fix the very problem she exposed." Lena studied him, her brow furrowed in quiet thought. "You want to use this as a turning point." "With your blessing," Victor clarified, "this didn't happen to me. It happened to you. If you feel strongly about pressing charges, I'll stand by that. But if you're open to another way, I'm listening." Lena sat still for a moment, then slowly nodded. "What if we don't make this just about punishment?" she said. "What if we make it about creating change? Clarissa's actions were completely unacceptable, but they may be symptoms of something bigger, systemic." Victor leaned forward, listening intently as Lena continued. "A company-wide initiative," she said, "bias training for frontline staff, clearer policies, accountability, not just window dressing, real action." "Exactly," Victor said, his eyes lighting with approval, "something with teeth. And Clarissa, if she's willing, can choose to be part of it. Help lead it, or she can walk away." Lena gave a faint smile. Restorative justice instead of just punitive action. "I thought you might like that," Victor said, relaxing for the first time all evening. A gentle knock interrupted their conversation. Victor called out for the visitor to enter. Evelyn Winters stepped inside with her tablet in hand, her voice soft and professional. "Mr. Hale, Mrs. Hale," she began, "your car is ready whenever you're comfortable departing. Your luggage has already been collected and is loaded in the vehicle. The driver is waiting to take you home or anywhere else you'd like." "Thank you, Ms. Winters," Victor replied, standing. "We appreciate the care." Evelyn hesitated briefly before speaking again. Also, I've been asked to let you know that Mr. Bell would like to meet with you both tomorrow morning at your convenience. He's cleared his entire schedule." Victor exchanged a glance with Lena, who gave a small, firm nod. 10 a.m., Victor said. "At my office. And please tell him to bring his head of HR and the VP of training." Evelyn looked slightly startled, but recovered quickly. "Of course. I'll confirm those arrangements immediately." "One more thing," Lena added, her voice calm but resolute. "I'd like Ms. Boyd to attend as well." This time Evelyn's surprise was obvious. "Clarissa Boyd? Are you sure?" "If she's willing," Lena clarified, "not as a requirement, as an invitation. She deserves the opportunity to explain herself, to reflect, to choose how she moves forward." I'll make that known," Evelyn said, still processing the unexpected request. After she left, Victor turned to Lena, clearly moved. "You really want to face her again?" "If we mean it when we say this is about change, not just consequences," Lena replied. "Then yes. I want her to see me, not just the woman with the crying baby, but me. I want her to confront the person behind her assumptions." Victor stared at her, awe softening the lines of his face. "Have I told you lately that you're remarkable?" Lena finally smiled, really smiled, for the first time since the incident. "Not since this morning. But I wouldn't mind hearing it again." "You're remarkable," Victor repeated, leaning in to kiss her softly. "And no matter what happens tomorrow, we'll face it together." As they gathered their belongings, Arya still peacefully asleep in her carrier, Lena found herself thinking about something Walter had said during the flight, that influence carries responsibility, that sometimes the person in the right place at the right time must be the one to speak. Maybe this was her moment to do exactly that. The next morning arrived crisp and bright, autumn in Eastwell City settling into its golden rhythm. Lena stood in front of the mirror in their apartment, applying a soft layer of concealer over the fading yellow of the bruise on her cheek. It wasn't painful anymore, but the memory still echoed. Her reflection stared back at her, worn but steady. Victor appeared behind her, already dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, adjusting his cufflinks. His expression was thoughtful. "You don't have to come," he said, meeting her eyes through the mirror. "If you're not feeling up to it, I can handle the meeting." Lena turned to face him. "I know you could," she said, "but I need to be there. It started with me. I should be part of where it goes." Victor nodded in silent support. "The nanny's already here," he said. "She's got Arya settled in the playroom." "Good," Lena murmured, turning back to the mirror for a final touch of lipstick. "I've been thinking about what I want to say." Victor's brow raised slightly. "Oh?" "This isn't just about Clarissa," Lena said, adjusting the lapel of her blazer as she glanced at herself one last time in the mirror. "It's also about the leadership, why this kind of behavior went unchecked, why she felt safe directing it at someone like me the second I stepped into first class with a baby in my arms." Victor raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You're going to confront the bias head on." "Someone has to," Lena replied. "And I'm in a position to do it, not just because I lived it, but because I'm married to the man who can actually implement change." Victor smiled, a hint of admiration in his expression. A powerful combination. "Just remember," he added, "we want real transformation, not just a public apology. This isn't about handing down a punishment from on high. It's about bringing people into the solution." "I know," Lena said, "and I've thought about this carefully." By 9:45 a.m., and they arrived at Hale Venture Group's Midtown headquarters. The glass and steel structure gleamed under the clear morning sky. Inside, the building buzzed with quiet activity as they made their way to the executive floor. At the reception desk, Andrea, Victor's assistant, greeted them. "Good morning, Mr. Hale." "Mrs. Hale," she said professionally, though her gaze lingered briefly on Lena's cheek, a barely noticeable bruise hidden beneath concealer. Clearly, Word of the incident had made its way through corporate corridors. "Everyone's already assembled in the main conference room," Andrea continued. "Ms. Boyd is here with her union rep. Legal counsel, HR, and training are all present as requested." "She came?" Lena asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Arrived about 20 minutes ago." Victor nodded. "Good. Can we get coffee and water in the room?" "Already taken care of," Andrea replied with a small smile. As she turned to make a call, Victor looked to Lena. "Ready?" Lena took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." When they stepped into the glass-walled conference room, the chatter immediately ceased. Seated at the long table were 5 people. Marcus Bell, the CEO of Orion Atlantic, distinguished, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed. Helen Chen, head of HR, crisp and alert. Thomas Donovan, VP of Training, younger and visibly anxious. Richard Webb, General Counsel, his expression unreadable. And at the far end, Clarissa Boyd, still in uniform but stripped of her wings pin, her posture rigid beside her union representative, a woman in a dark suit. Clarissa looked up when Lena entered and immediately looked away. The redness on her face had faded, but her demeanor was that of someone waiting for the final blow. "Good morning," Victor said, his tone measured but commanding. He gestured for Lena to take a seat beside him. "Thank you all for joining us on short notice." Marcus Bell cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale." "Mrs. Hale. First and foremost, please allow me to personally apologize for the appalling incident that occurred. I assure you we are treating this with the utmost seriousness." Victor nodded. "I'm glad to hear that, Marcus. Before we begin, I'd like to be clear. This meeting isn't about debating the facts. What happened is not in dispute. We're here to understand why it happened and what we're going to do to ensure it never does again." The union rep leaned forward, her voice calm but assertive. "If I may, Mr. Hale, my client, Ms. Boyd, understands the gravity of her actions and is prepared to accept whatever disciplinary measures are appropriate. That said, I must emphasize that she has a 15-year record of excellent service with only 2 minor incidents on file." Lena finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "And what were those incidents?" The union rep hesitated. "I'm not sure those are relevant to this particular case." "I believe they might be," Lena said evenly, "especially if they involve interactions with passengers, especially if there's a pattern." Helen Chen spoke up, flipping through a file. One was a scheduling conflict with a fellow crew member, nothing major. The other was a customer complaint from about 3 years ago. It was labeled inconclusive because the passenger didn't follow up. Alleged rudeness. Lena tilted her head slightly. Was the passenger from a minority background? A silence settled over the room, the kind that says everything words cannot. No one answered. And they didn't need to. "I see," Lena said softly, her gaze unwavering. "And I do believe that is very relevant to today's conversation." Victor nodded, his tone shifting as he addressed the room. "Let's be clear. My wife believes, and I agree, that racial bias played a role in how Ms. Boyd treated her from the moment she boarded the flight with our daughter. That underlying bias laid the groundwork for a hostile interaction that eventually escalated into physical assault." Across the table, Marcus Bell shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mr. Hale, we take allegations of discrimination extremely seriously." "They're not allegations, Marcus," Victor said firmly, cutting him off. "They are lived experiences. They come from the person it happened to. And I'm not here for polished corporate statements. I'm here to hear what you plan to do about it." The room fell into a tense silence. Then, unexpectedly, Clarissa Boyd raised her head. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Every gaze turned toward her. Her union representative placed a cautionary hand on her forearm, but Clarissa gently pulled away. "Go ahead," Lena said, her voice calm but direct. Clarissa took a breath, clearly struggling with the weight of her own words. What I did was inexcusable. There is no excuse for hitting a passenger, especially a mother holding her baby. I can't begin to express how ashamed I am." She paused, voice shaking slightly. "But I want to be honest. I didn't target you because of your race, at least not consciously." Lena tilted her head. "That's an interesting distinction." Clarissa flushed. "I mean, I've never thought of myself as prejudiced. I don't consider myself that kind of person." "Most people don't," Lena replied. "But from the moment I boarded, your treatment of me was different. You questioned my place in first class. You made assumptions about my parenting. You escalated small things into full-blown confrontations. That's not just having a bad day, that's bias." "I was having a rough day," Clarissa offered weakly. The flight before had mechanical delays and a passenger issue. I was running on fumes. "We're all tired sometimes," Lena said gently, but firmly. "But we don't all take that out on specific types of people." Clarissa lowered her gaze again, visibly shaken. Thomas Donovan, the young VP of training, finally spoke. "Mrs. Hale, if I may, what you're describing highlights a serious gap in our current training. We cover diversity, but only the basics. We don't go deep into unconscious bias, real-life application, or sustained education. That has to change." "I agree," Lena said, "but training alone won't be enough. You'll need real policy shifts, accountability, a change in culture." Helen Chen leaned forward, interest piqued. "What would you recommend, specifically?" Lena exchanged a glance with Victor, then replied with calm clarity. "First, conduct a full review of customer service protocols with a focus on identifying bias triggers. Second, implement enhanced and recurring training for all customer-facing staff, not just a one-time session, but ongoing learning with real-world scenarios. Third, create a clear and confidential reporting system for passengers who experience discrimination with guaranteed follow-up and transparency." "Those are excellent suggestions," Marcus said, his tone slightly more hopeful. "We can absolutely begin implementing those." "I'm not finished," Lena said, politely but assertively. Everyone turned to her once more. "Fourth," she continued, "there should be consequences for Ms. Boyd's actions. But I don't believe those consequences should be purely punitive. They should be constructive." Clarissa looked up, confused, as did her union representative. "What do you mean by that?" the rep asked cautiously. "I mean," Lena said, "that if Ms. Boyd is willing, I believe she could play a key role in developing and delivering the improved training programs. She has experience, years of it, and now she has the perspective of someone who acted inappropriately and is willing to face it. That could be powerful." The room went still. Clarissa stared at her in disbelief. "You're not pressing charges? And you want me to help with training?" Lena nodded. "If you're willing to take accountability, not just for the slap, but for everything that led up to it, then yes, I believe people can change. But change doesn't come from denial. It starts with honesty. You need to acknowledge the role that bias played in your actions," Lena said gently but firmly to Clarissa. "Not just the final moment when everything boiled over, but everything that came before it. The way you looked at me when I boarded, the way you spoke to me. It wasn't just about one slap, it was about a pattern." Tears welled in Clarissa's eyes. I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything right now," Lena replied, her voice softening. "I know it's a lot to process, but I want you to understand something. This was never just about you and me. It's about something that happens to so many passengers every day. Most of them don't have the platform or privilege I do to speak up." Clarissa nodded slowly, absorbing the words in silence. Marcus Bell leaned forward, looking genuinely reflective. "Mrs. Hale, your insight is incredibly valuable. I'd like to formally ask if you'd consider consulting with our leadership team as we create these new programs. Your experience and your professional background would be an enormous asset." "I'd be willing," Lena said without hesitation. "This can't be about PR. It has to be about real, lasting change." Victor nodded beside her. "I think we've outlined a solid direction here. Helen, Thomas, I'd like to see fully developed proposals for the training updates and policy revisions within 2 weeks. Marcus, I'll expect regular progress reports." He turned his attention back to Clarissa. "And Ms. Boyd, you have a decision to make about your role in all of this. No one can make it for you, but I hope you'll think carefully about the part you could play." The meeting drew to a close with quiet handshakes and sincere nods. As the others began to file out, Clarissa lingered, walking slowly toward Lena. "Mrs. Hale," she began, voice trembling, "I know saying 'I'm sorry' doesn't fix what I did. But I am sorry, not just for hitting you, but for everything that led up to it. I never really saw my behavior that way before. But now, it's hard to unsee it." Lena studied her for a moment, then said, "Discomfort is where growth begins, Ms. Boyd. The real question is, what will you do with that discomfort?" Clarissa took a breath, then nodded, a spark of resolve flickering through the shame in her eyes. "I want to be part of fixing this, if you'll allow it." "It's not about my permission," Lena said. "It's about your commitment to change. Not just for yourself, but for the people who'll come after me, who look like me, who might not have someone to advocate for them. Think it through, then let Mr. Donovan know." As Victor and Lena exited the conference room, he reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You were brilliant in there," he said quietly. "Clear, compassionate. That's a rare balance." Lena smiled, finally letting her shoulders relax. "I just kept thinking about Arya, about what we'd tell her one day. I want her to know that when we were faced with injustice, we did something. We didn't just get angry. We tried to change it." Victor's smile grew. "That's a lesson worth passing on. Now let's go home to her. I think we've changed enough corporate culture for one day." They stepped into the elevator together, a sense of closure wrapping around them like a soft blanket. Lena's mind drifted back to that moment on the plane, the sting of Clarissa's hand, the stunned silence, the fear. And now, there was something more powerful in its place. Hope. The weeks that followed were full and demanding. True to their word, the executives at Orion Atlantic began rolling out a comprehensive plan. They reviewed policies, strengthened accountability structures, and, most importantly, created an entirely new bias awareness training program grounded in empathy, education, and real-world reflection. And to the surprise of many, Clarissa Boyd didn't walk away. After serving a 30-day suspension and completing an intensive course on bias and emotional regulation, she asked to join the new initiative. She spoke openly, even uncomfortably, about her failure, how she had let her stress cloud her judgment, how unconscious bias had shaped her instincts, and how, for the first time, she was truly seeing it. 3 months after the incident, Lena stood at the front of a training facility in Orion Atlantic's headquarters, beside Clarissa. Before them sat dozens of flight attendants, listening intently. "This isn't about a single bad day," Lena said to the room. "It's about making sure every passenger feels safe, respected, and seen, from boarding to landing." She looked at Clarissa, who nodded, stepping up beside her. "I used to think I didn't have a problem," Clarissa admitted, "but I've learned the most dangerous biases are the ones we don't know we have until they hurt someone." Looking out at the attentive group, Lena felt a quiet sense of peace. The slap on the airplane wasn't the story anymore. The story was what they did afterward. After the training session ended, Lena found herself alone with Clarissa for the first time since that unforgettable flight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, not with resentment, but with everything unsaid, until Clarissa broke it. "I never imagined I'd end up here," she admitted, her voice low but honest. "When I lost control that day, I thought everything was over. My job, my reputation. I thought I'd be facing charges, public disgrace, maybe even jail. Lena studied her thoughtfully, then asked, "And if we had taken that path, what do you think would have happened?" Clarissa paused, reflecting deeply. "I would have been fired, no question, maybe prosecuted. And I probably would have defended myself, denied the bias element, blamed it on stress. Nothing would have changed, not for me, not for Orion Atlantic, and definitely not for future passengers who look like you." Lena nodded. "That's exactly why we didn't take that path. Real change doesn't come from punishment alone." Clarissa's voice dropped to a whisper. "I still don't understand why you gave me that chance." "After what I did to you, because it was never just about you and me," Lena replied. "It's about the system, the invisible assumptions and unchecked attitudes that determine how people are treated. And sometimes the people who were part of the problem can become the most powerful agents of change." Clarissa stood there quietly, absorbing the weight of that truth. Lena picked up her tote bag and slung it over her shoulder. "My flight's in a few hours. Victor and Arya are meeting me back at the hotel." "You're flying with us?" Clarissa asked, genuinely surprised. Lena smiled. "Of course. How else will I know if we're making progress?" As she stepped out into the hallway and made her way toward the exit, Lena felt a deep, quiet peace settle over her. The mark on her cheek had long since faded, but the impact of that day, the ripple it had set in motion, was still spreading. Changing minds, changing a company, changing conversations. It hadn't ended the way anyone would have predicted, but maybe that was the point. Maybe it didn't have to end in fury or lawsuits or scandal. Maybe it was becoming something better, a lesson, a transformation, a beginning. In the back seat of a car weaving through the city streets, Lena's phone buzzed. Victor had texted, "How did it go?" "Arya can't wait to see you. She's been reading to her stuffed animals all morning." Lena smiled, her heart softening. "It went well. I think we're really making progress. Tell Arya Mommy will be home soon with a new story to read, one about how the hardest moments can lead to the most important changes." She looked out the window as the buildings passed by, the skyline glowing with the golden wash of late afternoon. That one moment of cruelty on the plane, when a flight attendant had struck a mother holding her baby, could have just been an ugly story, a cautionary tale. But it became something else. It became a reckoning. It became a choice, to build rather than break, to heal rather than hurt. Clarissa Boyd hadn't known that Lena's husband owned the airline, but more importantly, she hadn't known that the woman she struck would be the one to help her find a better version of herself. By the time Lena reached the hotel, she felt a rare sense of completion. The story that began in fear had turned towards something meaningful, not born from vengeance, but from vision. She stepped out of the car, the city light brushing across her face. The future felt a little different now, a little more aware, a little more kind. And that, she thought, was the kind of story truly worth telling.